Well, for me, it was frightening on a couple of levels because I've never, in all the time that I've been coming to London, and
For 30 years, it sat there in silence. A plain, unremarkable storage unit in a Burbank warehouse. No bright labels, no flashy locks, just another metal door among hundreds. The name on the account wasn't famous. The payments came in cash. Month after month, year after year. When the man behind it, Sammy Davis Jr., passed away, the rent was still paid. Someone made sure of it. And then, after decades of being left untouched, the lock was cut. What they found inside was more than dusty costumes and forgotten stage props. It was a private archive, a secret history, letters that revealed the truth about his real mother's identity, reel-to-reel tapes of conversations that could ruin careers. And most explosive of all, proof of what really happened in 1958 with actress Kim Novak, a scandal so dangerous it could have ended both their lives in that era. Sammy had documented everything, carefully, meticulously. He had kept the receipts, not just the kind you fold and forget, but the kind that, if read by the wrong person, could change the story of Hollywood forever. To understand why, you have to go back to the beginning. Sammy Davis Jr. was born on December 8, 1925, in Harlem, New York City, a place already humming with the energy of the Harlem Renaissance. Jazz spilled from nightclubs. Artists, poets, and musicians crowded the streets. His parents, Sammy Davis Sr. and Elvira Ella Sanchez, were both vaudeville performers. Show business wasn't just in his family, it was his inheritance. But even before Sammy could walk, there were secrets. His mother was Cuban, a truth the family hid because of the prejudice of the time. In mid-century America, Cuban was enough to close doors, kill record sales, and trigger suspicion. They said she was Puerto Rican instead. It was safer that way, safer for business. Sammy's life, from his very first breath, was shaped by racism and by the need to hide parts of himself. By the time he was 2, most kids were learning to stack blocks or scribble with crayons. Sammy was learning to keep time with music. He joined the Will Maston Trio, his father Will Maston and himself, as the tiniest member of the act. The stage was his daycare. The spotlight was his nightlight. It was a magical childhood in some ways. He could dance, sing, and hold an audience in the palm of his hand before he was old enough to tie his shoes. But it was also a childhood without playgrounds or friends from school. There were no report cards, no recess bells. Instead, there were long bus rides between towns, smoky backstage rooms, and an unspoken lesson. That talent was his ticket, but hard work was the only way through the door. And it was on those roads, even before he could spell the word segregation, that he saw it in action. The whites-only signs on hotels and diners, the sidelong glances from strangers, the casual cruelty. It planted something inside him, not bitterness, but fire. At age 3, his life changed again. His parents split, and his father took custody. That meant even more touring, more nights on stage instead of at home. Will Maston became more than a mentor. He became a protector. But no one could shield Sammy from everything. He saw exactly how the world treated black entertainers. Applause on stage, discrimination off it. He also saw something else. That talent could bend the rules. If you could be so good they couldn't ignore you, you could sometimes slip past the walls they built. That became Sammy's quiet mission. When he was 7, Hollywood came calling. He landed a role in Rufus Jones for President, acting alongside the great Ethel Waters. The film was lighthearted, but it dared to dream in a way that was almost radical for the time, imagining a black child as President of the United States. Sammy's natural charisma jumped off the screen. Audiences couldn't look away. It was a hint of what was to come, a performer who could make people forget, if only for a few minutes, the color of his skin. Still, there were costs. Sammy never attended a traditional school. His education came from the road, from books he picked up in passing, from people he met, from the music and languages he absorbed like a sponge. He taught himself instruments. He learned jokes, dialects, even magic tricks, anything that might entertain an audience and keep them coming back. By the time he was a teenager, Sammy wasn't just a prodigy. He was a professional with a decade of experience. But in 1943, the bright lights went dark. The United States was at war. Sammy, barely 18, standing 5'6" and weighing just 120 pounds, was drafted into the U.S. Army. He left the safety of the trio and entered a world where the rules were harsher and the racism was raw. His was one of the first integrated units in theory, but in reality, it was anything but united. The very first soldier he met didn't greet him with a handshake. He called him a slur. The message was clear. The fight overseas would be brutal, but so would the fight inside his own camp. In the Army, Sammy's fame meant nothing. The applause, the charm, the years of work, none of it mattered under that uniform. What he faced wasn't just discipline, it was survival. Every day was a test. Every night was a gamble. The abuse was relentless. White soldiers didn't just insult him, they hunted him. Once they kidnapped him and painted his skin white from head to toe, a grotesque mockery of everything he was. Another time they handed him a beer, laughing as he drank, and only later realizing it had been laced with urine. Some nights they didn't even bother hiding the cruelty. They urinated on him in plain view. They broke his nose, not once, not twice, 3 times, and still, it didn't end. Sometimes they forced him to perform, shoving him on stage with racial slurs scrawled across his forehead, turning his art into a weapon against him. One winter night, they tied him to a tree in the freezing cold. The wind cut through his clothes, the frost gnawed at his skin, and in that icy darkness, the message was clear. You can dance, you can sing, you can be loved by millions, but to us, you'll always be beneath us. The Army didn't stop it. The Army didn't punish it. The Army looked away. That night never left him. It became a scar, not just on his body, but deep in his heart. Then came the worst beating of all. A group of soldiers jumped him without warning, fists and boots crashing down until he could no longer move. He woke up in a hospital bed, his body a map of bruises, his spirit dangerously close to breaking. 3 days passed before he could even stand. It wasn't random, it was punishment, and once again, no one paid the price. Lying in that bed, Sammy faced a truth. No one was coming to save him. If he wanted to survive, it would be on his own strength, and nothing else. For a moment, the darkness almost swallowed him. He thought about ending it. The constant hate, the humiliation, the violence. It was too much for one man to carry. But then, he found something. A lifeline. The Army's entertainment unit. On stage, under the lights, Sammy took back his power. His dancing, his voice, his showmanship. They were weapons now. Even the men who despised him couldn't resist the pull. Their applause wasn't just noise. It was proof that talent could silence hate, if only for a moment. When he came home in 1951, he was different. Harder, sharper, ready. He had fought for his country. Now he would fight for his place in show business. That chance came at Cairo's, the most glamorous nightclub on Sunset Boulevard. It was March 1951. The Will Maston Trio opened for singer Janice Page. Sammy wasn't just good that night, he was electric. But then came the night, the one that changed everything. After the Academy Awards that year, the club filled with the biggest stars alive: Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Cary Grant, Marilyn Monroe, Judy Garland. The room was glittering, smoky, buzzing with Hollywood royalty. Sammy stepped out under the lights and unleashed a performance that left them stunned. Jaws dropped, eyes locked. By the time he finished, the applause shook the room. By morning, the buzz was everywhere. Bookings poured in. In 1952, he appeared on Eddie Cantor's Colgate Comedy Hour. ABC even offered him a $20,000 TV pilot. Unheard of for a black entertainer in those days. Sponsors turned it down, but the industry already knew Sammy Davis Jr. was unstoppable. And then, November 19th, 1954. Sammy was just 29, driving his Cadillac from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, heading west on Route 66. At a fork in the road, another car suddenly backed into his lane. The collision was brutal. The force slammed his face into the horn button, straight into his left eye. Pain, blood, darkness. They rushed him to community hospital. The verdict came quickly. The damage was permanent. The eye could not be saved. He stayed only 9 days before insisting on leaving. Friends like Frank Sinatra were there constantly. The offers didn't stop. In fact, they tripled. Sammy came back on stage with an eye patch at first, then a glass eye. And, in true Sammy fashion, he turned tragedy into a joke, calling himself a one-eyed Negro who's Jewish. Many thought the crash had ended his career. 8 weeks later, Sammy proved them all wrong. He stepped back onto the stage at Cairo's, the same club where he'd made Hollywood fall in love with him. And once again, the room was his. Every movement, every note, every joke. It was as if the accident had only sharpened his fire, but the crash had changed him in another way. Lying in that hospital bed, face bandaged, eye gone, he began reading about the Jewish people's long fight to survive. A friend, Eddie Cantor, had given him a mezuzah and spoken to him about faith, perseverance, and identity. Sammy saw himself in those pages, a man who had spent his life battling prejudice, refusing to break. In 1960, he converted to Judaism. People mocked him for it. They said it was strange. But Sammy didn't flinch. He believed that being both black and Jewish didn't make him weaker. It made him stronger. He wore that identity with pride. He marched for civil rights. He refused to let anyone tell him where he could or couldn't stand. Las Vegas in the 1950s was a glittering paradise for the rich, unless you were black. Sammy could headline the biggest shows in town, but he couldn't sleep in the hotels where he performed. He couldn't walk through the front doors, couldn't eat in the restaurants. He decided that was going to change. With the Rat Pack at his side, Sammy pushed back hard, pressuring casino owners to end the hypocrisy. And they listened. By the early 1960s, he was making $25,000 a week at the Sands. He became the first black entertainer to stay at the Frontier Hotel. By 1971, Las Vegas officially ended segregation in its hotels, and Sammy Davis Jr. had helped make it happen. Sammy wasn't just a singer, he was a one-man universe. Drums, trumpet, piano, vibraphone. He taught himself them all. He could mimic voices, slip into impressions, tell razor-sharp jokes, dance with impossible energy, and even spin guns like a Wild West sharpshooter. Crowds called him Mr. Show Business because no one else could do it all. In 1956, he set Broadway on fire with Mr. Wonderful. The show opened March 22nd, written entirely for him, something almost unheard of for a black star at the time. Critics tore it apart. The New York Times called it loud and mediocre. But audiences didn't care. They came for Sammy, and they kept coming. The show ran 383 performances, making back its $225,000 budget and more. On stage, he made every night different, mixing in nightclub routines, letting his father and uncle join him, and sharing the spotlight with a young Chita Rivera. Off stage, his life was just as electric. Parties that stretched until sunrise, romances splashed across gossip columns, and a growing legend that seemed unstoppable. Then, 1964, Golden Boy. Sammy played a black boxer who fell in love with a white woman, and in one scene he kissed her. The audience reaction was explosive, and not in the way you'd hope. Bomb threats, death threats, letters laced with venom. But Sammy refused to change a thing. He stood in that role night after night, earning a Tony nomination and forcing theatergoers to face a truth they couldn't ignore. When he wasn't breaking Broadway barriers, he was marching with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma, risking his career and his life for the cause. Hollywood came calling too. In 1958, he starred in Anna Lucasta with an all-black cast. In 1959, he lit up the screen in Porgy and Bess alongside Sidney Poitier in Dorothy Dandridge. By 1969, he was stealing scenes in Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity. He joined the Rat Pack in Ocean's 11, 1960, and Robin and the Seven Hoods, 1964, kicking down doors for other black actors in Hollywood. Television couldn't get enough of him. From The Ed Sullivan Show to The Tonight Show, Sammy was everywhere. In 1966, he launched the Sammy Davis Jr. Show on NBC, becoming one of the first black entertainers to headline a primetime variety show. He packed it with the biggest stars alive: Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and more. He worked himself to exhaustion, doing dozens of interviews a week just to promote it. But it worked. Sammy's success cracked open doors for a generation of black performers to follow. And at the heart of it all was one friendship that had been building for decades. Frank Sinatra first met Sammy Davis Jr. in 1941. Sammy was just 15, performing with the Will Maston Trio in Detroit. Frank was 26, touring with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. The moment Frank saw Sammy move, he knew. This kid wasn't just good, he was rare. From that day, Sinatra made a point to help him. In 1947, he arranged for the Will Maston Trio to open for him at the Capitol Theater in New York. It wouldn't be the last time Frank pulled strings for his friend. That first break Frank Sinatra gave Sammy wasn't just a career move. It was the start of a loyalty that would change both their lives. In 1950, Sammy was refused entry to New York's Copacabana, a place where he was good enough to perform, but not good enough to sit in the audience. Frank found out, and Frank wasn't having it. The very next night, he ordered Sammy to come back. This time, the door swung open. Not only that, Sinatra walked in beside him, sat at the same table, and made it clear, if a club wouldn't welcome Sammy Davis Jr., they could forget about booking Frank Sinatra. It was a dangerous stand in a time when black entertainers were still forced to use back doors in segregated hotels. But Frank didn't flinch, and Sammy never forgot. When Sammy's 1954 car crash nearly killed him and left him blind in one eye, Sinatra stepped in again. He paid the hospital bills, brought Sammy to Palm Springs to heal, and then, in classic Sinatra fashion, gave him no space for self-pity. "Get back on stage," he told him, "or you'll lose everything." Weeks later, Sammy was performing again, a living testament to grit. Sammy admired Frank so much, he even copied his style, down to the curl in his hair. And as their friendship grew, so did Sammy's place in Hollywood's most exclusive circle. By 1960, that bond was front and center. Ocean's 11 hit theaters on August 3rd, premiering in Las Vegas. Frank, Dean Martin, Sammy, Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford, the Rat Pack, played WWE vets pulling off a massive casino heist. They filmed at night, then performed live at the Sands until sunrise. Sammy played Josh Howard, an indispensable part of the crew. The movie raked in $5.5 million, roughly $55 million today, and that final shot of the Rat Pack walking past a casino sign with their names blazing in lights became an image for the ages. Sammy wasn't the sidekick anymore. He was a star. Still, even as he was making $25,000 a week in Las Vegas, he couldn't sleep in the hotels where he performed. Segregation meant staying miles away on the city's west side. He fought back. Sammy became the first black entertainer to get free room and board at the Frontier, cracking the color barrier in the Strip's most glamorous casinos. He kept pushing, joining civil rights protests, buying a stake in the Tropicana, and using his fame to demand change. When Nevada finally passed a law in 1971 ending hotel discrimination, Sammy Davis Jr. had been one of the men who forced the issue. When he died in 1990, Las Vegas dimmed its lights for a full minute. The city that had once refused him a bed now mourned him like a king. Sammy kept making movies with the Rat Pack, Sergeants 3 in 1962, Robin and the Seven Hoods in 1964, holding his own next to Frank, Dean, and Bing Crosby. These weren't just crowd pleasers. They were proof that Hollywood had to take Sammy seriously as a leading man, not just as a novelty act. But off-screen, his life was about to veer into dangerous territory. In 1957, he fell in love with Kim Novak, one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. They met on The Steve Allen Show, spent holidays together, even met each other's families. But in America at that time, an interracial romance wasn't just scandalous. It could get you killed. Only 4% of Americans approved of such relationships. Emmett Till's murder was still fresh in the nation's memory. Sammy and Kim hid their love, meeting in secluded houses, Sammy ducking under blankets in cars to avoid photographers. Then in January 1958, a gossip column falsely claimed they were engaged. Hollywood panicked. The mob got involved. One night, mobsters with ties to Columbia Pictures abducted Sammy. The message was simple: end it with Kim, or lose your other eye, or your life. Even mob boss Sam Giancana told him there was nothing he could do to protect him. Terrified, Sammy ended things with Kim on January 7, 1958. 3 days later, he married singer Lori White in a sham wedding meant to calm the tabloids and the mob. He paid her up to $25,000. The night of the wedding, he was so distraught he tried to strangle her. His assistant later found him alone with a gun. By April, the marriage was over. The love story had nearly destroyed him. and proved just how dangerous it was to defy America's racial rules in the 1950s. 2 years later, he defied them again. In 1960, Sammy married Swedish actress May Britt. Interracial marriage was still illegal in 31 states. Bomb threats poured in. Their synagogue canceled the ceremony. They married at Sammy's home instead, with Sinatra and Lawford standing as witnesses. Both Sammy and May had converted to Judaism, becoming one of the only black Jewish interracial couples in the public eye. The backlash was brutal. Swastikas were painted on their property. May lost her 20th Century Fox contract. Sammy was even uninvited from President Kennedy's inauguration because of his marriage. Still, they built a family. In 1961, their daughter Tracy was born, proof that Sammy Davis Jr. would live life on his own terms, no matter the cost. After Tracy's birth, Sammy and May expanded their family, adopting 2 sons, Mark and Jeff. But the hate didn't fade. Racial slurs appeared on their cars. Swastikas defaced their home. Inside their walls, Sammy and May tried to create a safe haven, surrounding the kids with artists and friends who judged only by talent. But the world beyond that bubble could be vicious. Years later, Tracy would recall moments of feeling perfectly safe, until she stepped outside and racism slammed into her like a cold wind. Hollywood didn't forgive May for marrying Sammy. Her once bright career was over. Studio heads decided audiences wouldn't watch a white actress married to a black man. By 1968, the marriage had reached its breaking point. May filed for divorce, citing extreme cruelty and mental suffering. Sammy's affair with singer Lola Falana was the last straw, but the real damage came from years of absence, relentless touring, and the constant public hate. The divorce shattered Sammy. He dove into the shadows. Drugs, alcohol, late-night binges. Cocaine and amyl nitrite became his escape. His Beverly Hills mansion transformed into an anything-goes party palace, where celebrities drifted through for drinks, drugs, and whispers of scandal. On stage, he was still electric. The smile, the snap, the showman's magic. Off stage, he was unraveling. In 1970, he married dancer Altavice Gore. Reverend Jesse Jackson officiated. They would adopt a son, Manny, in 1989, just a year before Sammy's death. Altavice brought moments of stability, but their home was anything but quiet. Rumors swirled about wife-swapping, orgies, and round-the-clock parties. Through it all, Altavice stayed, even as Sammy's addictions deepened and throat cancer later closed in. When he died in 1990, she inherited not wealth, but ruin, over $7 million in IRS debt. The house went. Most possessions went. She battled her own drinking problem, sliding into poverty, but she fought to keep his legacy alive, hosting tributes and charity events, determined the world wouldn't forget him. Money had been both Sammy's blessing and curse. Over his career, he earned around $50 million. At his peak, he could pull in $185,000 a night, but the money slipped away as fast as it came. Blown at the gambling tables, lost in shady tax shelters, swallowed by bad business deals. Sammy could drop $40,000 in a single night in Vegas. Unlike Sinatra, whose debts were often forgiven, Sammy paid every loss. He was generous to a fault, bankrolling friends, supporting family, and never saying no to someone in need, even when he should have. Still, the 1970s brought a career high. In June 1972, he hit the top of the Billboard Hot 100 for the first and only time. The Candyman, a song he'd hated at first, sold over 2 million copies and earned a gold record. It charmed a new generation of fans, turning Sammy into the unexpected face of bubblegum joy. But for Sammy, his true anthem was another song, I've Gotta Be Me. Released in 1968, it was his manifesto, a refusal to bow to prejudice, to hide who he was. He sang it as a man who'd faced racism, religious bias, addiction, public scandal, and the loss of his left eye, and still kept coming back to the stage. Every performance was a declaration of survival. By the late 60s, Las Vegas was his kingdom. He commanded $25,000 a week and changed the Strip's rules, demanding equal treatment for black entertainers. His shows became legendary: song, dance, spot-on impressions, and razor-sharp comedy. Sammy Davis Jr. didn't just play Vegas. He helped make it the entertainment capital of the world. Even today, his face still shines from casino walls and billboards, a reminder of the man who once ruled the Strip. On television, Sammy broke barriers. In the 60s and 70s, he was everywhere, lighting up The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show, and his own 1966 variety series, one of the first hosted by a black star on network television. He could do it all: sing, dance, joke, mimic, impersonate, and millions adored him. But just behind the curtain, the shadows grew darker. His drug use and drinking deepened during a strange period of occult fascination. Friends remembered long nights of cocaine, endless booze, and excess that blurred into chaos. Sammy once admitted he wanted to try everything, but everything came with a cost. Addiction eroded trust. His marriage to May collapsed under betrayal and absence. On bad nights, he became unreliable, once ending a show after a single song. Cocaine eventually left his life, but alcohol never fully did. And as his darker pursuits took over, even Mr. Show Business seemed in danger of losing his crown. Then in 1987 came a spark. Fans across the globe rejoiced when Sammy announced he was reuniting with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. The Rat Pack's farewell tour was finally happening. At first, it was the International Farewell Tour. When Liza Minnelli joined in, it became the ultimate event. This was no smoky lounge act. They played to arenas holding 10,000 to 25,000 people, a scale the Rat Pack had never dared. Opening night, March 13th, 1988, at the Oakland Coliseum. The magic was real, for a while. But Dean Martin, already 70, couldn't handle the grind. 5 shows in, he quit, citing kidney problems. The tour stalled, then reformed. Minnelli took Martin's place. They finished the U.S. run in January 1989, then played Japan, Australia, and Europe. The curtain finally fell in May 1989. 3 months later, Sammy's real fight began. In August 1989, food lost its taste. His throat felt raw. The diagnosis was brutal: throat cancer. 4 packs a day for decades had caught up with him. Surgeons offered him a chance to live, but only if they removed his voice box. For Sammy, his voice was his soul. He chose radiation instead. 8 grueling weeks later, the tumor shrank. For a moment, hope returned. But by early 1990, the cancer was back, spreading. Surgery was no longer possible. His voice was reduced to a whisper. His body shrank to 60 pounds. On May 16, 1990, at 64 years old, Sammy Davis Jr. was gone. The man who had once filled the largest stages in the world was silenced by the very habit that had fueled his long nights and endless shows. Then came the second shock. Despite earning millions over 6 decades, Sammy died owing more than $5 million in taxes. Penalties and interest pushed it to $7 million, about $13 million today. His estate, worth $4 million, went straight to the IRS. His widow Altavise had co-signed the tax returns, so the debt became hers too. She sold their 11,000-square-foot mansion for $2.7 million, most of it eaten by the mortgage. The bills were humiliatingly small and large all at once: $2,000 for tuxedos, $3,500 for groceries, $118,000 for a shopping center mortgage. Even his insurance and future royalties were seized. In September 1991, the heartbreak became public. More than 1,800 people gathered in Los Angeles for an auction of Sammy's life. Over 500 personal treasures: his gold Candyman record, $4,275, a pair of tap shoes, $11,000, his jewelry, his scrapbooks, his walking sticks, even his hats. The sale raised $439,000, barely a dent in the IRS bill. Altavise wept as strangers carried away pieces of her husband's world. And then, a twist. Later that year, a 28-year-old man named Matthias Horenik got a bill for $365 for a storage unit he'd never rented. His ID had been stolen. When the company investigated, they found the unit had been rented under fake information just 2 weeks after the auction. Inside, Sammy Davis Jr.'s personal treasures: a trumpet, an antique record player, a jukebox with the Candyman ready to play, clothing, documents, photos. The culprit? a former employee of Altovice. He claimed he'd stashed the items to save them from the IRS. If he'd kept paying the bill, no one would have known. The IRS seized everything. Altovice insisted she knew nothing. But the hidden storage became just another bitter chapter. The aftershock of a life lived in brilliance, excess, and defiance.